Okay, we just finished the interview with Grandma, and now we're going to move on and talk to some questions with Grandpa Cole. Okay, Grandpa. How are you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, let's start at the beginning. Why don't you tell everybody the watermelon story?
Oh, that goes back to when I was about 5 years old, maybe 6 years old. That's when we were living on Benjamin, Northeast, walking through we call it an alley, but it was behind the Evangeline home, which was on Fulton Street, and we were going to school. And the school was, what was the name of the school? It was a Christian school. Can't remember the name of it. But anyway, my brother and a couple other boys talked me into going over the fence to get some fruit. So, naturally, I'm the youngest. I jump on the fence, over the fence, but I never got the watermelon because I got hooked on the top of the, I don't know what they call them. The
barbed wire?
Barbed wire or something. In fact, I still have the scar on my leg.
Why don't you show us? Where is it?
Well, let's see, where is it? Well, that's... Here it is, right there.
Look at that scar.
So, it was bleeding. I go back home, and my mother was very disturbed. She spanked me, put a patch on, a Band-Aid, sent me back to school. That was it. I should have had stitches and everything, but that's the way it was.
Tell me a little bit about your family life.
My family life. Well, I have father, mother, and 2 other brothers.
And what was your dad like?
My dad was maybe 1 inch shorter than mother, and they were a very sound couple, very Christian. Dad might be conservative. Mother was more outgoing, I think, and that I think Dad came to this country when he was 17 years old by himself and lived with some relative in Grand Rapids for a while. Then he went to Calvin there for a couple of years, and then he went to work somewhere. I can't remember all the details. My mother came over and landed in Long Island, West Sable, Long Island, New York. And that's where Grandpa Vanderest was not only a fisherman, but he was a lay preacher out there in West Sable. And then after a period of time, they moved to Grand Rapids, Michigan, where they settled. They found each other, got married, and that's it. Had children, 3 boys, no girls.
What was your relationship with your parents like?
Father was more conservative, and at that time, the 1920s and 30s were tough years. So there were not many hours that a father could give their children because of the problems with work, trying to make a living. In fact, my oldest brother left school at the age of 16 so he could go out and find work at the CC camp to help support the family. Because at that time, Dad was in business. He lost his business, lost his house, banks closed. It was a kind of a disaster situation for many, many people.
Do you remember the Depression very much?
Yes, I remember going to the fire barns, picking up bread and milk. and bringing it home.
What about your mother during this time? Was she a pretty strong woman?
Very strong. She felt things would always be better, and but she was interested in helping the children. Us kids were always helped by Mother when she was home by herself.
What kinds of things were you involved in your high school years? Did you have something that was your forte or some classes you really liked at all?
Well, I don't think I was a really good student. I was more interested in sports like some of the kids today. I went out for football, went out for track, and received a couple letters in each sport. I think they did give letters out in those days. I don't think they do today, do they? A big...
Yep, they give those out today
Do they
too,
see?
yeah.
I don't think they do it in California because GERD doesn't have any.
Oh.
But anyway, love sports. Pole vaulted, high jumped, hurdles.
Lots of
fun.
Did you work during high school?
Yes. High school, worked in drugstores, a soda jerker, and worked in a clothing store, haberdasher.
Did you take out a lot of girls in high school?
No, I wasn't.
Not a ladies' man?
No.
Okay, this is a question from Dad. When your father left the Netherlands and his family when he was 17, never to see them again, how do you think that impacted him and how he lived the rest of his life in Grand Rapids?
Well, I think it's got to have some bearing on his life. To leave father and mother and never see any of them, any brothers, sisters. He came from a his, hers, and theirs family. Same thing as Esther's. So maybe that's why he left the situation too, because you got his, hers, and theirs, 3 different families, and therefore he wanted to get away. And he felt this was the opportunity to go to USA.
Tell me about when you were drafted into the Army. What were your feelings when you found out you had to go?
To be just like, just think of this. If you're 18 years old, or 17 and going to be 18, and they said you're going to go to service, you're going to go to war, let's face it, kids are scared. And they didn't make it any easier because when you get in the service, they'll say, remember, you're going to get shot at. And therefore you might be killed. And they made it that way so that you would learn the skills that you're supposed to have. That's why I worry about the National Guard going into a place like Iraq, because they don't have the training. And I feel sorry for them as well as the regular soldier that has to be with the National Guard, because you sometimes can't trust your fellow. It's easy to shoot a gun, but shooting the gun properly at someone, you have to be very careful.